Doug, good afternoon. Great to see you as always. Let's talk about what happened yesterday and the similarities with January 6th. Yesterday was the 8th of January, the day 2 years off. Awfully similar, and two leaders who left office sowing doubt in their supporters' minds.
And many pundits were saying about what we saw in Brazil with this assault that it was essentially an insurrection foretold. That is, the writing has been on the wall with exactly this type of politically galvanized violence. Violence by far-right, let's not mince words here, far-right hardliners that have been radicalized by toxic political rhetoric. Rhetoric which did not just start yesterday or the week before. The previous Brazilian president, Jair Bolsonaro, throughout his term in office, railed against what he said were the fraud and the rigging of Brazil's national election system. He has since sort of imbued all of his backers with this vision of an elitist conspiracy at work in Brazil, at heel in Brazil, out to bring down his government, out to bring down the ordinary people, out to him and his supporters. And that remained very much entrenched. So you had these, I say the words again because the wording here is important. Far-right, radicalized hardliners. I'm not saying far left here. Are there sometimes instances of far left? Sure there are. But in the predominant cases, and especially in the pattern we've been seeing, that connect the dots between Brazil and the January 6th insurrection in the U.S., it has been far-right hardliners who have been radicalized by toxic misinformation and disinformation and malinformation to cling on to false claims. Another way of saying that is to cling on to lies about elections being rife with fraud, to reject the results of elections, of national elections, in so doing, to deal a blow to the jugular of democratic institutions, and to continue to embrace their champions. In one case, Trump. In another case, Jair Bolsonaro. In both cases, those champions often trying to refute that they have anything to do with this.
Now, what we saw yesterday in Brazil comes now that the country has a new president. Lula da Silva has been in office for less than a week. In the United States, it was a different case because we had Donald Trump, who was still in office. Can Lula bring the country together?
Yeah. How many times have we used the word with polarized, not just talking about U.S. politics, but Brazilian politics? And the reason we use that word time and again is because it's not a cliche. It's not overused. When we talk about the deep divisions in Brazil, now we saw that those thousands of Bolsonaro supporters who stormed the three centers of power, the legislative, the executive, and the judiciary, sure, you could say that they're, a fraction of Brazil. They do not represent the so-called will of the people, as Lula would say, but the fact of the matter remains that, yes, he confronts an enormous task. Look at the officials who've been sacked in the wake of this, including the governor of Brasilia province. A lot of officials continue to remain perceived allies of Jair Bolsonaro, doing his bidding. So even if Bolsonaro said that he rejected violence, that this was not the way forward, that, suggested that his supporters should just move on and accept the results of the election, even if he never unequivocally did so, even as you see that, you still have a constellation of his supporters in there, and even questions about the degree to which the security forces, the police themselves, might have been more beholden ideologically, partisan that is, to Jair Bolsonaro's vision as opposed to Lula. He has an extremely uphill battle. Remember, Brazil is still a work in progress democracy-wise, right? It had a 21-year military dictatorship from 64 to 1985. This democracy project in Brazil, it has been at times a glaring success, a shining success, a beacon for a lot of other emerging countries in the world. But it's only been 3 to 4 decades in progress. And it's amazing, as we've seen, how quickly all of that can be brought into question. And the entire so-called democratic experiment, which was precarious at best, can be brought down. It's going to take a very, very big uphill boulder rolling challenge by Lula to keep Brazil now on track.
The fact that we saw a democracy in peril 2 years ago in the United States is a testament that
start with disinformation and start with misinformation. That is going to be a massive part of this equation and how to crack it.
Thank you very much for that, Doug. Douglas Herbert there.